Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. After massive VCT format drama over the last few days, it's continuing last night as Riot confirmed they are laying off 530 employees globally, over 11% of their workforce, and many of these individuals worked exclusively on the VALORANT esports program. Many questions to be raised, especially with exactly whether this is some of the reasoning why we're not getting as much VCT action as we might want to see for the upcoming season, and what exactly the future holds for the VCT with many of its key employees laid off within the last 24 hours. Very much into your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I'd greatly appreciate it. I'm away to Boston for a week for a Call of Duty event. I'll do my best to keep you guys updated on the Valorant stuff. There may be some days with no videos, depending on how much happens. It's going to be a busy time, so, I'll do my best. But the videos for sure will be later than normal. They won't be in this normal slot because it's literally impossible, pretty much, when you're in US time zones to get the video up for this time. But anyway, you guys know what I mean anyway. So, plenty to dive into. Firstly, some roster stuff. Turtle Troop. These guys managed to qualify. They won the play-in, didn't they? They got through the play-in last year after challenges ended to re-qualify, and Stella and Corey are going to be joining them, right? Stella and Corey were two players that were linked at some time, I'm pretty sure, to Evil Geniuses over the last month or so. There was maybe some trials going down there with these players. That never happens. Of course, they went a different direction. Jorgamo, Derek, Superman, Apoth, and Nature is still the rumoured team of 5. But as of recording, not yet confirmed. So there's still questions at EG, for good reason, on whether that team will actually exist, whether FlyQuest is going to be a thing. I guess we'll have to stay tuned. But yeah, Turtle Troop confirmed that Stella and Corey are coming in, so of course these guys are going to be in challenges for the upcoming season. The challenges qualifiers in the Americas coming out very soon indeed. Well, actually in Brazil it's already started, we'll see in a second, but in North America it's starting in just a couple of days time. Just to clarify, if you guys aren't familiar with this team: Wedded, Adder, Corey, B-Dog, Stella. Good team on paper for sure, and as we can see here, the most recent stuff they played in the VCT side was on the VCL North America, where they beat Ore Esports to confirm their spot in the play-in relegation, to confirm their spot for the new season again. So they are one of the few, not really organizations, but one of the few teams that actually remains next year in challenges. There are not that many, based on what's happened over the last little while here. There's also this that a few of you guys are pointing out to me, that SK Rossi was hinting at a potential next step for him after the global esports saga ended. He's now going to join Revenant Esports for the next season. This is apparently going to be their team. So majority Indian team, obviously wishing these guys the best. But yeah, Valorant challenges South Asia, so it's kind of tough to see SK Rossi. I thought maybe he'd get a spot somewhere in the VCT, but that's not going to happen, and he's going to have to work his way up again, as many players have done so successfully in the past. I'm sure that can go well. Speaking of FlyQuest though, and this whole Evil Geniuses stuff, Sonda actually is joining the FlyQuest Red kind of Game Changers Valorant team, which is definitely exciting stuff. But also, you've got to say, here comes FlyQuest into the world of Valorant Game Changers again, and understandably there's big questions raised on what exactly this means for when potentially Evil Geniuses spot could be up for grabs, right? The belief is, as it stands, and still for good reason, that e.g. Jorgamo and Derek and the players I just mentioned are going to be joining the team, and even Derek and Jorgamo having a bit of an interaction last night on the timeline. So that is probably going to happen. And to be fair, NRG, they spent ages to announce their team, despite the fact that it was like locked in and done. We were expecting the announcement for, I think probably it was like 3 months really when they thought they could get those guys. It took a lot longer than that to actually get the contract signed, but it was still several weeks after they had Ethan and Demon 1 locked in that it took them to actually, get the deal done, I would say, or at least get it announced on the timeline. So maybe that's the same thing with EG. They're taking a while to announce it, but also there are still questions as to whether EG are actually going to be in the league, whether Riot are going to kick them out, basically, as they've kicked out some employees. We'll see here in just a second, and whether FlyQuest will come in, because if FlyQuest do come in, they will not be obligated to sign the same team that Evil Geniuses just signed, I would imagine, based on the way the contracts will probably work. But last night, speaking of this Challenger stuff, the Gamers Club Challengers League 2024 Brazil qualifiers have been going down over the last day or so, and what we are seeing, as we saw in the Americas, is some of the Game Changers teams try to qualify, right? In North America last year, you got version 1 or whatever it was, I think it was version 1 then, qualifying through or trying to qualify, and they made some run, but it wasn't going to be enough enough to qualify for challenges. However, in Brazil, it's potentially on. So Team Liquid Brazil, obviously the best, Game Changers team from that region, they were playing last night. And the funny thing is actually about this game, I believe, is that Jujina, she is dating this guy Zenom on the other team. And then, like, she beat him with, of course, the Team Liquid, Game Changers roster to take these guys down 2-0. And that qualified them through to the closed bracket, I believe. So they made it through the open qualifiers. They're now going to be in the closed qualifiers. Really cool stuff for Game Changers Valorant here because, this is the type of stuff that Riot intends for the Game Changer scene, or at least that's what they say they intend publicly, is that, they want the Game Changers people to, make it to the next level and, compete at Masters and Champions. Whether they actually want that, that's another question, just because, Game Changers is such a good marketing tool. But it's really good for the scene, I think, that this is happening. So we'll see how they do from then on out. But one thing that's not good for the scene, really, is, these layoffs at Riot Games. So this is happening all across the tech landscape at the moment, and worth mentioning here that I believe the severance package that Riot are giving these former employees is pretty mega and in line with what you get in a lot of big tech companies, like, 6 months of pay, basically, like straight up, and there's other things as well. So good severance package for sure. But nonetheless, it's a very common thing right now across all sorts of tech companies, Amazon, Google, Facebook, like whatever you want to say. They're all laying off employees. Twitch the other day, we saw laid off a massive amount of their staff as well. Twitter did so, X, whatever, when Elon Musk first came in. And, arguably, that's kind of what started, right? Elon came into Twitter, fired everyone, and, the company was maybe technically was struggling for a little bit, but now it basically runs as it did previously, and you can debate whether Twitter is better or worse than it used to be from like a content standpoint, but, from an actual technical point of view, it doesn't seem much different with lots of employees gone. So I think a lot of companies see it this way nowadays, that, well, some employees maybe, we can operate without them, and therefore they're making changes and looking to really streamline some of their operations to, lay off some employees and just focus on a few small things. And that's what Riot say in their announcement here, that, like, they're just trying to focus on basically less, fewer projects, but focus on them more so. So, that's what Riot explain. Like, honestly, this ecosystem is, for Riot and organizations like it, so massively profitable that, they don't have to make a move like this. But, that's how these companies are operating nowadays, especially in the tech world. So 530 roles globally gone. That's like 11% of the employees of the company. So pretty substantial. And they talk about doubling down on the games at the center, such as Valorant and others. There's also questions, of course, about if you're laying off employees, what about the, the replay theater potential mode, which was a big talking point, right? People wanted a replay feature in the game, and that's not happened now for some time. And now you're laying off a load of employees, many of which work on the Valorant system. Whether there's going to be anything in that, I guess we'll see. The concerning part, I would say, really, for the VCT is that they talk in their announcement that, okay, no, we're going to double down on esports, we're doubling down on Valorant and this type of stuff, we're focusing on these, few projects, but yet, Derek Dennis here, who's, worked closely with guys, I don't know, Psycho replied to this, of course, who was around in the Valorant landscape for some time now. He's working with M80 as their, like, GM, kind of doing more Counter-Strike stuff, but, Derek Dennis here, he was the head of league management for North American esports for Valorant, and he was, part of the layoffs, right, as he says. Unfortunately, I was impacted by this, which is massively surprising, so wishing the best for all them involved. But I think it's just surprising that people like Derek here, who were very much involved with the North American Valorant landscape and esports in general, have been let go. In addition here to Jen, who was the comms lead for NA Esports. So whether somebody else is going to take up those roles or whatever, I don't know, but it just doesn't seem like necessarily a good sign when there's lots of concern at the moment about the way that Valorant is currently sitting, the way that the esports world is trending, the fact that do we need more games or whatever, right? There's been lots of talk about this over the last few days. And just when there's been serious questions about the future of the VCT and, is it going to improve in future seasons, a lot of top employees get laid off. So not really sending the greatest message. And it does also imply that, things like this could potentially continue, right? We know there's lots of talk from the fact that Riot have to manage the Valorant world and also the League of Legends, let's say the World Championship, right, to the end of the year. They can't have those clash. It does create issues for Valorant, the amount of matches they can really do. And even your boy Dre, former player, you guys probably remember, he joined Riot as like a QA or something a while ago. And lots of his close friends are now gone. So not a good sign really. And as a result of this, maybe not as a result of this so much, but just at the same time, there was further talk about the format and more debate really between coaches and players. So the other day we mentioned that many players are in favour of having more matches. You know, I know that Sideshow made some valid points on his perspective on this. My personal opinion is still that I think we need more games. Some players seem reasonably satisfied with only having like 10 regular season matches all season or whatever, which I don't personally think is enough. But look, if you're fanatical saying you win your 10 regular season matches, you qualify for the big tournaments, you're going to play more than that anyway, but still not a crazy amount of games. Kaplan, though, Sentinel's coach, gives his perspective on it, which was an interesting take and is worth considering. If VCT had many more games in a season, there would be less time for teams to prep between games, which is true, naturally. This might mean less strategic deep matches, less changes to compositions, and possibly would shift too slowly after patches because experimenting would be a larger risk to take. Now, I'm not actually sure I agree with this assessment here, and also the solution to less prep time between games is just, alright, well, how about we do more games, but the season is just longer. Instead of 6 months, we do 8 or 9 months, so we get more games and still the same amount of prep time, in theory at least. But this is what Shazam says, which, I think fans would appreciate watching their favourite teams play more than the potentially increased strategic deepness of each match. And also, as Shazam says, this most recent season, NRG, they started the season experimenting quite a lot. It quickly realised that it weren't working. They had to go back to basics. They did, and they did well at the end of the season. They just about made it through. But I would actually argue that, experimentation is more risky when there are fewer games because, you have to ensure that every game matters massively. Whereas if you play double the amount of games, you can afford to experiment more because each game individually in terms of qualifying is worth less, right? If you only play one team once all season, I don't think you can really do too much experimenting because I think you're taking a risk for yourself. So I think it actually in some ways might be the other way around. And, we see even IMI, it's interesting in the community because there's some people that do believe that the way that it is with the fewer games is better. And I think the coaches are more likely to agree with that because, they want to win, really. A lot of the players, they want to win, but they also just want to play. They enjoy playing the game from a competitive level. Whereas the coaches, it's all about winning. It's all about coming up with new ideas and all this stuff. And sure, fewer games means more opportunities to do that. But there's a question as to how that actually works in practice. But even IMI, right, Head Coach at Cloud9 says that surely we can do preparation and enjoy 2 matches a week. Like in regular sports, the teams prep and come up with new ideas, but they still play, more than we do in esports for some reason or another. And even as Chet says, how about we do more games by having a longer calendar, and then that will work. That doesn't end in August. Problem is, of course, you end the season later than then, and you're starting to conflict with League of Legends World Championships and stuff like this, and then it gets somewhat problematic. But I just thought to close out the video here, worth mentioning what Dazzle said, because I think it's worth, when you look at these things, just taking it to the logical conclusion and seeing what that looks like. Because if Kaplan's point is valid, that the more matches you play, the less strategic depth you can have, then what about we play 1 game a season, or 3 or 4 games a year to get the best quality? As that's what Dazzle kind of said. Obviously he's joking, right? Agreed, they should cut it down to 3 or 4 matches a year max for the teams so we get the best quality, which obviously doesn't really work, right? And Vanity's taken the mick out of this as well, which is maybe a fair and valid point. That look, if you want to make this argument, then you have to also understand why it doesn't really make sense to play no games, even though those games might be of great quality, right? Fans want to see action, and also sponsors want to see action because they want their brand to be on display when these guys are actually playing the matches. So I think it still helps all parties, but there's been lots of debate on it over the last few days, as you might expect, but not necessarily the greatest sign for Valorant esports going forward. Hit the like button if you enjoyed though, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.